Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for Ever After, Colin, a Cinderella story.
Yeah, was that the working title, or is that actually what it was released as?
It shows up on Rotten Tomatoes with the full title.
Okay, it says in promotional materials it was known as Ever After, a Cinderella Story. Because I think that was on the DVD box you had, but I don't know if it actually said a Cinderella story in the movie.
After it bombed in opening weekend, they just decided they needed to make it a little clearer that it was a Cinderella story.
And they needed to put that Margot Robbie was at the helm of it.
And no Joker in this one.
No.
The teaser trailer was Cinderella just basically saying that she was done with Mr. J.
With what's his name?
Jared Leto.
Doug Gray Scott as
Yes.
the Joker. And Angelica Houston as Killshot. Wasn't she in? No, she wasn't in.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Give it time.
She's not part of any superficial, fantastical franchise yet. Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, joined as always by my Peruvian counterpart, Julio. Julio, we're here for part 2 of our Drew Barrymore, just kind of bridge, filling some gaps here.
Spontaneous.
Yes.
Drew Barrymore two-parter.
In between just an absolute ridiculous amount of Terminator action. We're here to discuss the 1998 romantic comedy, fairy tale, old English style. It was the prelude to Shakespeare in Love, of getting American audiences groomed and ripened for an old English style story.
I mean, if you go further back, or rather, further forward, it was a prelude to all the live action adaptations that Disney's been throwing our way.
Yeah.
This was the test run.
Yeah. Andy Tennant, he had his ear to the ground even back then. If this is your first time listening to the Contrarians, we appreciate you listening. And just to kind of fill you in on what we do here, as we like to say, we rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. Find a movie that's highly rated or certified fresh, make a case for why it necessarily shouldn't be. On the opposite side of the coin, we'll find a movie that is low rated, a nasty green splotch, or rotten, make a case for its positive merit. Being that Ever After is 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, we will be arguing against it. If you want to know how we really feel, hang around for the second half of the podcast, appropriately entitled Real Talk. The previous Drew Barrymore outing we did, we've done in the past.
We did Never Been Kissed.
Never Been Kissed.
Which
I was blanking on it.
It was a gray area.
Yeah. And previous to this, we did her 2003, 2002, 2004, somewhere in there. It was called, I was told it was a comedy, but I'm not entirely sure. Duplex with Ben Stiller. And that was a lowly, rotten film that we had to make the best out of.
So now to finish the sample
Yes.
of Drew Barrymore's tomato meter career, we're with the fresh.
That we are. Being at 91%, it does mean there's a whole gaggle of people that enjoyed it, including Drew Barrymore herself. I read that she said it's
She's a big fan.
It's one of her favorite movies she made.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a bona fide Drew Barrymore vehicle.
Yeah, it'd be fun to get dressed up and all that shit.
Make out with Doug Ray Scott, with not Wolverine.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Hang out with Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes, why not? Worked for Bruce Willis. All right, so I got a handful of fresh quotes. from the Rotten Tomatoes website. We have Betty Jo Tucker from Real Talk Movie Reviews, who says, Ever After presents a plucky Cinderella for today's women and beyond. And this was late 90s. This was before being a feminist was trendy. Jeffrey M. Anderson from Combustible Celluloid says, a delightful movie full of feisty, three-dimensional characters romping through comedy, romance, and otherwise gloriously colorful moments. I didn't know that you could use romp as a verb. Romping through. Mick LaSalle from the San Francisco Chronicle says, the best Cinderella movie ever.
Wow.
I know. Has he seen any other Cinderella movie?
I don't know.
And finally, Jeff Weiss from Deseret News, Salt Lake City says, a cut above the revisionist versions of classic literature we've had to muddle through in recent years.
Yeah, it really seemed like the mid to late 90s there was a swelled interest in 19th century France or Britain.
So what is he throwing shade at? Like Emma? Sense and Sensibility?
That's the thing. I'm saying that there was a swelled interest, and I'm just blanking on any real titles that came out.
Your interest in particular was not swollen.
No.
I
was still in elementary school, like on the verge of middle school, so it was... I don't even remember what I would have liked back then. It was
Drew
before
Barrymore?
Well, yeah. There you go. Wedding Singer. That's where I knew Drew Barrymore from, because Adam Sandler was funny. I feel with a movie as literary as this, it's appropriate to actually read a sampling to kick us off. So we go to the works of Sir Wikipedia.
Please tell me it starts with Once Upon a Time.
It does not.
Sir Wikipedia.
It's actually written very similarly to the Smokin' Aces breakdown that they had. Vivacious magician. The story goes back to a Renaissance-era France in 1502. Augustus de Barbaric. How do they pronounce their last name?
Barbaric. I'm guessing.
Barbaric. Is a widower and the father of an 8-year-old Danielle. Augustus marries Baroness Radmila de Ghent, a haughty woman with 2 daughters, Marguerite and Jacqueline, and also gives Danielle a copy of Sir Thomas's Utopia. The next day, while leaving for a trip, Augustus suffers a fatal heart attack and collapses off his horse. His dying declaration of love is directed towards Danielle, sparkling a lifelong jealousy of the girl in the Baroness. 10 years later, the manor has fallen into debt, and Danielle is forced to work as a servant along with Paulette Maurice and his wife Louise. For Radmila and her daughters, Jacqueline is the only one out of her family to show Danielle any kindness. One day, Danielle stops a man from stealing her father's horse, only to realize it is Prince Henry running away from the palace in frustration. He gives her 20 gold francs in exchange for her silence of the incident, as he is fleeing an arranged marriage set by his parents, King Francis and Queen Marie, to Spanish Princess Gabriella. The royal guard catches him, however, after he stops to recover the Mona Lisa for Leonardo da Vinci, which has been stolen by gypsies. Meanwhile, Danielle uses the gold Henry gave her to buy back Maurice, whom Radmila sold to Cartier, and into slavery to pay off her debts. She dresses as a noblewoman and confronts the cargo master, taking the slaves away. Henry overhears Danielle arguing with the cargo master and orders Maurice's release. Impressed with her confidence, Henry insists and begs for Danielle's name until she finally gives him the name of her deceased mother, Nicole de la Crête, and then adds Comtesse on it.
I am disappointed that Sir Wiki of the Pedia did not simply say, hey, it's Cinderella, but live action.
Yeah. So, rounding it out, King Francis tells Henry that he is throwing a masquerade ball where he will choose a bride by midnight or wed Gabriella. Meanwhile, Radmila schemes to marry Marguerite to Henry, finding excuses for the two to run into each other. And that brings us to here, to now, to Cinderella. So that, it should have just been the plot. See Cinderella, 1940, whatever.
Yeah. It's crazy because, really, I'm not kidding. This is the precursor to everything people hate about the Disney live-action adaptations of today. Mm-hmm. It just takes a beloved animated classic, strips it out of all the magic, the fun stuff, the songs, and introduces a lot of darkness. It's the Batman v Superman of the Disney universe, where there's a lot of crying, there's a lot
of fake accents,
a lot of fake accents. It's so gritty and miserable.
Yes.
I mean, I don't remember this much crying, this many tears in the original Cinderella.
I do not remember people being sold into slavery
or whipped.
Yes. Oh, we'll get to the crossfade whipping. The most pressing question is, and this is something we talked about in our Never Been Kissed episode, when has Drew Barrymore ever been an outcast?
Yes. How is she... Just on the strength, I mean, I don't want to be superficial, but on the strength of her looks alone, she should be able to just rise above
Melanie Linsky, Jacqueline, I would buy her as potentially a social outcast. She's very shy and reserved and
she's
introverted.
Awkward. Yeah.
But
Drew Barrymore tries to be awkward, and the most awkward thing is her accent.
See, that's I would believe Drew Barrymore in a Cinderella adaptation that really was just like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where we have like birds and stuff drawn in, because I could see her interacting with the wildlife and the magical creatures of a Disney-esque universe.
I thought you were gonna say it was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, in the sense that everything is animated around her and she's the only live action thing. So it's like, of course it's really awkward. She doesn't fit in here.
But yeah, casting her in a gritty version of this is like, I don't know, if fucking Christopher Nolan cast Harvey Fierstein as Commissioner Gordon. It's tonally inconsistent.
You can't. Some actors and actresses they have the ability to disappear into the role.
Mm-hmm.
Harvey Fierstein doesn't. Drew Barrymore doesn't. It doesn't mean
there's anything wrong with them.
It's just that you don't cast them in certain parts.
Cast in a certain part that she is accustomed to, the Baroness, Angelica Houston. She's just mean.
She's the poor man's Meryl Streep.
The evil stepmother.
It's like, when you can't get Meryl Streep would not be caught dead in a movie like this. So then you ring up Angelica Houston, and then it's like nobody told her that this was a kid's story.
Yeah, she goes for the jugular. I think she read this not unlike Joaquin Phoenix read Joker, and it was just, I'm going to take this to the darkest depths of possible humanity.
This is my chance.
This is my Oscar.
Yes.
Marguerite, played by Megan Dodds. I'm not overly familiar with her. We mentioned Doug Gray Scott plays Prince Henry, and I guess the only other real character of consequence is, of course, Leonardo da Vinci, played by Patrick Godfrey.
What were the odds that in 102 official episodes of podcasting, we would have Da Vinci show up as a supporting character in 2 movies?
You never know, man.
That's the only fantastical element in this movie.
Well, I was going to say, so the summation there I went through has obviously brought us up to about 20 minutes into the movie or so. And it's Cinderella. We're not going to beat you over the head with it, at least from that aspect, in terms of this poor girl is with her stepmother and stepsisters that don't like her. They've pretty much made her their servant. She meets the prince, who's arranged to be wed but doesn't want to do it. Yada, yada, yada. They hit it off. And the first scene of their interacting, there's the horse scene, but the one that I kind of finished on, where she barters the deal back to get her fellow maid's husband back, Maurice. That's the first scene, I think, where they allowed Drew's confidence to kind of shine through.
Right.
And she just dwarfs Doug Gray Scott here in terms of ability and presence.
Much like Hugh Jackman for the remainder of Douglas Scott's life and career. Drew shows him that she's the real deal, and he can only be second best.
But they do hit it off. He, I think at this point, doesn't really quite know he's smitten with her. But one thing I found myself noticing here from this forward is there's a much more interesting movie here that's not Cinderella. There's like this...
Well, this is not Cinderella, Alex.
There's like this 19th century Forrest Gump possibility we have on our hands here with Prince Henry. He's like this tennis player. He's friends with Leonardo da Vinci. Like, they just happenstantially look at the Mona Lisa one day. It's like every time we're with him, and I'm more talking about Prince Henry. I'm not talking about Doug Gray Scott.
Just
I'm
the
talking
character.
about there's the germ of an idea of a better movie here.
Right, because as part of bringing the Cinderella story to realism, they try to just make Prince Charming a character.
Mm-hmm.
So they give him a name and they give him flaws.
And they try to make it realistic, but there's still the "you must be wed in 5 days at midnight."
Yeah, there's some conventions they just can't break, and but
the most ridiculous ones.
I kept waiting for at the very end for the king to go, well, am I a sultan or am I a sultan? You can marry whoever you want. They create this character that really, I guess, could have been played in a more charming way. But Doug Ray Scott was just kind of, I guess he faced off with he faced off against Drew Barrymore, and she showed him, yeah, exactly, and then she was the alpha for the rest of the movie. So all he can do is just follow her around like a puppy dog, and kind of miss out on all the possibilities of having this character interacting with so many other historical figures.
It seems like also with these Cinderella stories, when it's animated, we kind of let certain things slide that we don't in other situations. Even up until this point here, and again, we're just speaking in the first act of the movie, it's like there's got to be a way Drew Barrymore can get out of this life.
Yeah, I mean, there is. It's not like her family was completely divorced from the town, right? Her mom was actual royalty, or she was the Baroness or whatever. So how is it that nobody even acknowledges that? Wow, the poor fate that has fallen this woman, right? Everybody they just act like she's just a peasant, when really everybody should know, no, she's a peasant now, but she is the daughter of a baroness. And why do they let Angelica Houston mistreat her? Yeah,
she, like you said, she comes from royalty, but they just all kind of accept that she's low on the totem pole, except for Jacqueline. She seems to have some sort of pity for her.
I guess kindred spirits. We're both awkward.
But yeah, she does have friends outside of the house. She has the 2 maids that she works with, that she's friends with, and she also has Gustav, who's her,
the equivalent of the gay best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
They couldn't go too far, but he paints. He has zero interest in her romantically.
There were no gay people in the 1500s.
Oh, that's what it is.
Gay people were invented by MTV in the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's not gay. He just doesn't like Drew Barrymore that way.
But you're exactly right. The romantic comedy, if this was released in 2001 through 7, he would have been the happenstantial gay best friend.
If this was Cinderella starring Amanda Bynes.
Yes.
In the modern
times.
What
was the veiled remake there?
Snow White.
Snow White.
Yeah.
Sydney White. Yes. The main thing I remember from that is because there's the equivalent of like the 8 dwarves.
Right. And it's just like these dorks, right?
Yeah, morons. And whoever the female rival is in it, they all like walk by her at one point in the movie and they go, "Hi ho. Hi ho."
I'm pretty sure I've seen that movie.
I screened it, so that it's ingrained into my memory. And as you can imagine, they still don't really pull off the she's asleep and he has to kiss her very well. But again, some things you let slide in animated movies that you wouldn't elsewhere.
Yep.
But animated Gustav is not. And he, you want to talk about 3-dimensional characters. If he turned sideways, he would disappear. He's so flat. He's just there to,
move the plot along a couple times.
Yes, exactly. Because she's hanging out with him one day, right? And then the prince just shows up.
Yeah, no, I think the first time we see him, he helps her get dressed to pretend that she's royalty.
Okay.
That was our introduction to him. It's like, which again made me think,
that's when he's
the gay best friend, because
he
knows fashion. He has access to clothing and all that stuff.
Gustav, he helps for the first encounter, but then there's like another day where they're just kind of just hanging out in their casual clothes.
Yeah.
They're civilians.
Yes. Yeah, and then the prince, I was going to say drives by.
He rides up on his horse. Because she's flying a kite, which I guess Da Vinci made for her.
Yeah. So Da Vinci...
And he's, what is this crazy flying machine?
Why would you put Leonardo da Vinci in this movie?
That's what I'm saying. There's a more interesting movie here that's just like, what's Da Vinci doing?
the subversion. The screenwriter, whoever wrote this movie for Andy Tennant, was trying to go for something else, and Tennant kept determined to make it a Cinderella story.
The absolute temerity of the screenwriter to make Leonardo da Vinci just a background character. It's insulting.
It's like the closest you get to
Suzanne
the Fairy
Grant,
Godmother.
Andy Tennant, and Rick Parks.
Okay, so Susanna Grant was she was aiming for something else.
Mm-hmm.
That was when the movie was called Ever After. It had nothing to do with Cinderella.
We were far from a colon at this point.
Yes.
A swing and a miss. You want to try to make like this movie and place in this wildly historical character and just be like, oh, but they just kind of exist in this universe here. It's like in Watchmen where they just show Andy Warhol for no reason, but just to have Andy Warhol in a shot.
So you have a point of reference in regards to like the rest of the world.
Oh, that's the time period.
It's happening in the real world. That's why there's no singing mice.
That's why they don't have any guns.
But the thing is, it's a fucking sanitized version of Da Vinci. Da Vinci was a man whore.
Mm-hmm.
Da Vinci was like always hooking up with. He was getting in trouble all the time.
And he's like an affable old man.
Right. He's just, like I said, the equivalent of the fairy godmother.
He's got his boat shoes where he's like walking on water. And at one point, looks like rain's coming. But this scene we're discussing here, Henry pulls up. He tries to get information from Gustav about Drew Barrymore, about Danielle, and he's like, "Oh, I know her," and it's like a scene from Grease or something. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about, but she doesn't go to the school.
Tell me more.
Exactly. And then he just like makes up this story as he's going along, and it's so obvious he's making it up as he goes along, but the prince is hanging on every word of it. I guess that's Doug Gray Scott and his agent after he didn't take the role of Wolverine. No, it's gonna be all right. Tells her, yeah, I know where the Comtesse is. She's visiting her cousin. She's up there right now all alone.
That's the worst lie ever. Because you would think that he would want to position Drew Barrymore's fictional character as far away from Drew Barrymore's real character. But
yes.
Instead, he says, oh no, she lives in that house. So he's really setting her up to fail because...
basically directs them literally to the scene of the crime.
Yeah. That's the easiest place where he could figure out that she lied to him. And also, the thing is, really, the prince really is an idiot. The more you think about it, it becomes clear that he just doesn't have any brains because he's met Drew Barrymore already. And she happened to be, a little muddy, a little dirtier than when he met her again as pretend royalty. But it was still Drew Barrymore. If you run into Drew Barrymore, you remember later. It's not like... I mean, you spent the first 20 minutes of the movie kind of trying to piece together where you knew Melanie Linsky from. Mm-hmm. And that's Melanie Linsky, who is in the background in most of the scenes. If you meet Drew Barrymore, even just on the accent alone, you would remember. You'll recognize her later.
Yeah.
It's not this big mystery of, wow, who is this new woman that just appeared? It's like, oh no, it happens to be the woman that was plowing the fields and hit me with an apple.
Yeah, I guess he hit her really hard. She hit him really hard for him to forget. But
he was seen double the entire time.
But yeah, Gustav basically in effect sets this rendezvous up between the two. I wish there had just been a shot of him just like where it's revealed that he's like this massive sociopath and he's like, yes, sweet, gorgeous chaos.
This will bring the monarchy down.
So she has enough time, though, to get all dolled up before the prince gets there. They go and spend a whole day together. They're at the library, and then they go for a walk after the horse-drawn carriage breaks down. And it's just, what I envision a perfect first date would have been back in 1502.
Back in the day. Yeah. Not just you, Alex. Pretty much every screenwriter that has to come up with a quirk, like something that makes their female protagonist interesting and not just a regular girl.
Yeah.
She likes books.
They just were missing the shot of when the horse-drawn carriage broke down. She ties her hair up and gets in there and fixes everything.
Well, they go even further. They make her an action star.
Oh, yeah. Because a ways down the trail, they're encountered by some gypsies who...
The gypsies that stole... Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, I guess, in the beginning?
Yeah.
Or is there more than one group of gypsies just running amok the kingdom?
I mean, it was the Wild West back in 1502 France.
Which, by the way, it's France, but everybody speaks with a British accent.
Yeah, no one speaks actual French.
So why not just go with the regular accent from everybody? I think Douglas Scott is Australian. Just a melting pot France 1500s.
Just don't tell us where it is. We got to figure it out for ourselves.
It's
and then at the end, they're like, it's Delaware. But
somewhere in the Rust Belt.
So, yeah, the gypsies are going to steal their shit and basically are just there to kind of fuck with them. They try to beat up Prince Henry. He kind of fights his way out. And because Drew Barrymore comes down and kind of jumps in the fracas herself. And then what's the deal they make with her? That they can get away if she can carry him away?
Yeah, so first the prince, so he's not completely emasculated by the movie. They feel like they need to give him some sort of...
He holds his own.
Right, he gets a few punches in, and then he says, your beef is not with her, it's with me, so let her go. And then,
That's right.
And then because Drew's spunky and
I am woman, hear me roar.
Yeah, she goes, well, first, you're going to give me back the dress that you were trying to steal. Second, you're going to give me a horse because this guy was my ride. and then the gypsy thinks that he's pretty smart and he says, okay, I'll let you leave with whatever you can carry.
Oh,
and then
she picks him up fireman's carry style.
Yes.
Yeah, she picks him up on her shoulders and begins carrying it. And then she gets down the hill and the guy's just like, I'll give you a horse. I'm just messing with you. And then they just end up partying with the gypsies all night.
Yeah, she was in a hurry to get back home so she wouldn't be found out because she's, she should be cleaning the stables or whatever. But then they
let her sample the booze like Joaquin Phoenix makes in The Master. And she's like, what is this delightful concoction? And, of course, it leads to her and Prince Henry having their first kiss around a bonfire.
What was the movie? Oh, it was Camille, right? Or we're talking about the open mouth kiss.
Yeah.
They go at it here.
Yeah.
The Prince and Drew Barrymore.
And they're sucking face, but then like the head gypsy comes in like Frigo in Adventureland. It's like, boner! You've got a boner! He comes in and like just completely... It turns into, for a brief moment, a college party movie.
Pretty much, because the way they react to it was just like, oh, they're suddenly bashful.
He just comes, and points and laughs. He returns Danielle back home late in the middle of the night. She's awoken the next day. It looks like a fucking shot from Hocus Pocus with Angelica Houston and then the two stepsisters, because she's like poking her with a broom. She's like, get up and make us breakfast. And Drew Barrymore says something to the effect of, make your own breakfast.
And forgets her place.
Yeah. And Marguerite is like the biggest bitch of them all because she tries to steal some of Danielle's mother's clothing.
Right.
Like a dress and some shoes. And in doing so, insults Drew Barrymore's past mother. And so we get our action scene of the movie where Drew Barrymore punches her in the face.
Sends her flying across the room.
She takes a hell of a bump off the punch. And then it leads into like a Benny Hill sequence of them chasing each other around. And then the book that was left to her by her father, Marguerite's like, I'm going to throw this in the fire if you don't give me the shoes. So she hands over the shoes. And of course,
but that's so
stupid
dumb.
Old man, I'm a snake.
Yeah.
And she throws it right in the fire.
How could she not? That's one of the most exasperating things about this movie is that Drew Barrymore is really smart and really streetwise until the script requires her not to be.
Yeah.
Here, anybody in the audience knows that that book is going into the fire, whether she gives her stepsister the shoes or not. And yet she hands them over.
And there it goes.
What she should have done is just to fuck with them. She should have thrown the shoes into the fire first.
Oh, man. Mind fuck.
That's the badass move.
That's, yeah, JGL at the end of Looper shooting himself.
Yes.
So here comes one of the most jarring moments in the movie. We do a crossfade from what's gone on here, like basically Drew crying over this book in the fire. A crossfade to her in bed having been whipped.
Numerous times.
Yes, mercilessly.
It's like at least 3 or 4 games of tic-tac-toe on her back.
She's scarred up, and Linsky's there helping her, kind of tending to her wounds. But it's just like the audience goes from feeling sorry for her to being ungodly uncomfortable over the fact that she was apparently drawn and quartered and whipped in assumingly the front yard for all to see. It
won't be the last time that the movie pulls this trick, this horrible trick in a kid's movie.
Yeah, and I guess I understand they couldn't. They didn't want to show it, as we've talked about on this podcast before. In very much real talk, one of the most memorably disturbing scenes I've ever seen in a movie is the whipping scene from 12 Years a Slave. So not that I'm asking to see things like that replicated on screen.
Angelica Houston's Striker!
Jesus. It's pretty jarring. Could have just basically, I don't know, she could have just been not given food for a night.
It's a very tricky business translating these very simple, very vague in a way stories, fairy tales, to the real world.
Yes.
Because once once you're live action and things have like this extra weight, then you can't just imply things. The moment that you see that she's being whipped, you're like, okay, automatically you assume this is not the first time it's happened, because she's not even shocked.
She's not too torn up.
Right. Drew Barrymore's kind of crying, but not as in, wow, I can't believe this happened. More like, man, it happened again. Me and my big mouth. And then it makes you wonder, like, what else is happening? And it kind of sets the stage for you to make even more horrible assumptions as the story goes on, because more horrible things happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, your mind starts to wonder what's happening off screen in this world. And now suddenly we're in a world where whippings happen to good people.
Marguerite and the Baroness have tea, crumpets, what have you, the next day with the Queen. And figure out through talking to her about what Prince Henry's been up to and whatnot, they deduce that Danielle has been meeting with him and gallivanting in the fields. And
that seems like a big leap that they would put that together.
They do it pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean,
all she has to say is like, he was out late last night. He was out late. He came home late. And they're like, damn it, Danielle.
There's only one other person in town that was out late.
And so that becomes their life's mission now to make sure that she crashes and burns. So immediately Angelica Houston makes up a tale of, oh, yes, Danielle they're still referring to her as the Comtesse. She's engaged to a Belgian and fixing to head back home shortly. Running parallel to this, Drew meets with Prince Henry again and wants to tell him the truth, but she just can't. And this, again, results in a massively open-mouthed kiss.
the hormones overcome them in this realistic take on the Cinderella story. They just keep fucking.
So it brings us to the night of the ball. The belle of the ball, as Prison Mike would say, would be Danielle, only she has been locked up by the Baroness and her evil sister, as their goal is still to get Marguerite shacked up with Prince Henry.
Oh, what happened to the dress? Because she gets locked up because the dress has gone missing. The dress and the shoes. Mm-hmm. And so they're convinced that it was her. And she's like, well, I don't know where they are, but I don't give a fuck.
Oh, yeah. She said, I'd rather die or something than see. She does the Charlton Heston, from my cold, dead hands.
Yeah. So she gets in trouble. She's put in the corner.
Yeah. She's
locked away.
And I love this shot here of the two old maids trying to help. They're Jessica Bieling it. They got the Swiss Army knife and they're trying to pry the lock open. But the prince sends his men, or is it?
No.
Is it Gustav?
Maurice goes to get Gustav.
That's right.
And then tells him that because Gustav dabbles in painting, he should go get Da Vinci.
That's right. Da Vinci comes and gets her out.
Right, because Da Vinci is a genius, so he can overpower the lock that nobody else could break open.
That's right, because we have fucking Leonardo da Vinci as a secondary character we got to use from time to time.
Suddenly justify his presence in the movie, I guess.
Yes, Da Vinci is here to pick the lock. So Danielle is freed. She makes her way to the ball. And she stopped in the PlayStation store along the way to buy her 99-cent alternative skin because she's like in a butterfly outfit. I mean, it was a dollar well spent.
She gets a hell of an entrance. But the movie, it's like it refuses to give you an ounce of magic, right? Even in the original story, even before you go to the animated version, the whole idea is that Cinderella dances with the prince.
Yes.
Nope. We're not going to get there.
She's like already crying when he's like, no, this way, come. And she's like, no, we need to talk. And he's like, nonsense. Then he slaps her and he's
What could go wrong?
And then Angelica Houston just jumps in and blows the lid off of everything. Prince and the Pauper, any classic Disney tale of feigned wealth or status, I should say. She comes in and make sure that she's taken down a peg.
And the prince reacts like a little bitch. To me, this is where his character just crosses over to the dark side and there's no coming back.
Yeah.
The way that he treats Drew Barrymore when he finds out that she's a commoner.
It's not like one of those things that they were able to change in movies like this throughout the 90s and into the 21st century, where they would kind of pivot the outrage going from like who someone is more to I'm just hurt because you lied to me.
You should have trusted me.
Nope, not here. You're poor. Get away from me.
You're just one of them. And they have such an easy
And she calls him Henry, and he's, don't you dare.
Don't be so personal with me. It's something like that. But they had the perfect out because they had the king there. And the king has been, throughout the entire movie, his only purpose has been to say, hey, you need to marry royalty.
Yeah.
And so they could have just had the king be the bad guy. The king orders Drew Barrymore taken away, and the prince can't stand up to the king. It's not great, but it's better than him being a complete asshole to the woman that he loved 5 minutes ago.
And then being apart for a few weeks and realizing he's really horny, so he needs to hit her up and see what's going on.
Yeah, she was a really good kisser.
Yeah. Da Vinci, draw me a nude. So as if that's not bad enough, Anjelica Huston the next day sells Danielle into slavery. It's very off-putting because she sells him to this creepy-looking dude.
Yeah, we've seen him before once.
Making a pass at Drew Barrymore and talking about how big his dick is.
Yes.
He's older than Drew Barrymore.
Older than most people in the cast.
Yes, and not that there's anything wrong with age discrepancies in relationships,
but it makes it creepier.
None of the affiliation or infatuation is returned here.
There's no chemistry, and he's just being gross.
And yeah, and he kind of like licks his lips and is like, me and the Baroness have an understanding. And then she like kind of figures it out. It's like, no. And then his men just come and grab her and take her away.
It's horrible.
It's terrible.
And it fades to black, kind of like letting your mind wonder, okay, what's going to happen now off screen? You know, she got whipped off screen already. So what is this guy? He's just taking her off, and he doesn't seem like a very nice dude. So
he says, looks like the spider's caught himself a couple of flies. In return, she gets a bunch of the shit that she pawned for money. I mean, the undertone here is that Anjelica Huston is very bad with money, and she has like a slight gambling situation where she
just turns to Drew Barrymore and it's like, this is how I win.
Damn it. I was trying to piece that together, how that would work. But yeah, she like loans shit to people and then sells stuff just to buy it back, and it's a very, very uncut gems type situation for the 19th century.
When Drew Barrymore goes, you can't do this. I disagree.
I disagree. We are going to go through with this arranged marriage for Prince Henry to the Spanish princess. And again, a scene that's just ungodly uncomfortable. This Spanish princess, Gabrielle, is just bawling as she's being led down the aisle. And it's like silent, and apparently this is supposed to be played for laughs.
It goes on forever.
Because like the priest or whoever is trying to go through the whole rhetoric of what gathered here today, and she's just like wailing openly, and we see her stilted lover on the side just questioning everything in his life that's brought him up to this moment. It's very, very uncomfortable.
It's also uncomfortable. It's funny because maybe the best idea in the movie, it's also it brings out one of the worst sequences, which is this one, right? Because I like the juxtaposition of, you just saw Drew Barrymore basically sold to this gross old man against her will.
Yeah.
And then you cut to this Spanish princess basically traded against her will to this guy. What's the only difference is that Doug Ray Scott, he looks better.
Yes.
but she's just as miserable. So as an idea, as a concept, that's kind of powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kid's movie, though. That's you're off the deep end here. This is just too dark. It's too adult.
Yes, it's a swing and a miss.
Yes.
I don't even know if I'd say that.
The bat just went
I was
flying.
about to say it's a foul ball that hits a kid in the face, and the game kind of stops, and everyone's like, "Do we keep playing?" So
some asshole is laughing in the background.
Yeah. So
and detaining
Brad in Family Stone when everything's really uncomfortable and he just starts laughing.
Yep.
The prince realizes this is wrong. You're free to go now.
It took that.
Yes. It took her basically wishing death to come at any moment for him to be like, this isn't worth it.
He's like, I know exactly how you feel. Not quite. You got your shit together. She is terrified.
So then we cut to Drew Barrymore's situation where Danielle, with her captor, I guess her owner.
It's like you breathe a sigh of relief because it's like, oh, she hasn't been raped yet.
He essentially like forces her, attempts to force himself on her at this point. And this is like the most badass scene Drew has. And it's not played for laughs in any facet, which is probably for the best.
We're past the laughing in this movie.
She reaches back and pulls a knife out of his pocket, slices his face open, then she grabs a sword and is like, I'll kill you, pretty much.
But she says, my father was a great swordsman and he taught me well. And you're like, we didn't know that. All we saw of her father was him getting on a horse and dying.
Do you know what I can do with this sword?
Hello, my name is Drew Barrymore.
You killed my father. Henry realizes what he wants. He tracks down where Danielle is, brings her back.
She forgives him.
She does.
Like,
pretty quickly.
All it takes is him calling her by her real name.
He says, let's go back to Dover, Delaware together.
But it's like all this badassness that you had built up throughout the movie. If nothing else, the movie successfully paints Drew Barrymore as a strong-willed, smart, mostly resourceful character that makes a few errors in judgment. Overall, she doesn't take shit from anybody.
She should have Penny Laned him here and said, like, okay.
meet me at the palace.
Give me your money, and then I'll meet you here. And then it reconnects him with, I don't know.
I mean, if you're going for the realistic approach and pro-feminist approach...
she should have Penny Laned him and hooked him up with Jacqueline.
With Melanie Linsky. Yeah. That would have been... But no, I mean, or just, just go all in. She just says, let's just be friends. Gets on his horse and just rides off into the sunset to have other adventures.
Or she says, like,
behind.
I'm sorry, I'm already involved. And then she gets on Da Vinci's horse with him. And they ride off.
Says, I'm pregnant and it's not yours.
Jesus. And he's just like...
He's Italian.
He's just like laughing and like the horse kicks its legs up and... I got it! Still got it! And then we know that they're going to end up together. So the last like 6 minutes of the movie just exist to humiliate Angelica Houston on camera.
They dragged that out too.
Oh yeah, because she's like held in front of the king and queen. You lied to the Queen of France, and who's gonna speak for you before we like basically put you in a giant catapult and launch you out of town?
No, even worse. The worst fate in the 1500s. They're sending her to the Americas.
That's right.
The nerve of this movie.
Reginald Trump will take you from here. So Drew Barrymore is like, I'll speak for her, and they like, okay, well, you can punish her, and she just says, well, I wouldn't want to treat her any worse than she treated me, which basically means now you're gonna be a maid and
do the dishes and do the laundry.
Yeah, and then it results in Angelica Houston and the actress who plays Marguerite taking a bump into like a lilac dyeing pool, and so basically they got to paint Angelica Houston like Grimace for one shot.
One last wild left turn from Andy Tennant into comedy.
And then we center it back, and it's like, it is kind of like the end of The Family Stone where everyone's all together again. And you have Danielle and Prince Henry and their cool best friend, Leonardo da Vinci.
The gay best friend as well.
Yeah, Gustav is there.
The two maids.
Yeah, it's like the end of a Disney movie or a romantic comedy where everyone's together again. And then the kicker to finish it off is Head of a Woman, a portrait by Da Vinci. We find that it was based on Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, that's if
she doesn't have that above her bed right now, that's just a failing on her part.
The framing device of the movie is basically they stole it from Titanic, right? Where they have an old woman telling the story of Cinderella. Did you think when the movie started that was supposed to be old Drew Barrymore? Because at the very end, she's like, my great-great-great-grandmother.
Yeah, the closer we got to the ending, it was starting to make me think that like we'd cut back to it and be like, anyway, that was me.
Yeah, especially because the movie has gone dark for so long that
it goes dark at the end too. Because it's like the shit kind of fell apart in France.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Well, because like the last thing, she doesn't even say they live happily ever after. She's like, most importantly, they lived or something like that.
And then La Guillotine happened. Yeah, I thought that it was just going to be, we were going to find out that the prince died in one of the wars or whatever. The French Revolution, I guess, and that was just her telling the story of how happily ever after doesn't really mean anything.
But they did live. And they ended up together.
I mean, I think that he, as you like to say, outkicked his coverage.
Oh, absolutely. Doug Gray Scott, come on. I mean, there was that scene where she initially wants to tell him the truth, where she's like in that burgundy ensemble with like the bustier, where he like eyes her up and down, and he's just like, "I need this."
Well, that's a detail of a character that really they don't delve enough into, because when he first meets the sisters, Marguerite has some sort of medallion over her chest.
Yes.
And there's this close-up of the medallion and her boobs, and then cut to a close-up of the prince just blatantly staring at it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, so I thought maybe the take is going to be that the prince is kind of a perv and he's not good for Drew Barrymore. No, they just kind of dropped that. I mean, I guess it explains how hungrily he goes after her.
I was about to say, he's just a young man with a penchant for breasts, which I think a lot of us can relate to.
It's really funny because
this was before asses became the big thing.
The next shot is because the prince is on his horse and he's talking to Angelica Houston. So Angelica Houston is it's a shot from overhead. You can see the prince's shoulder. Angelica Houston is kind of leaning over, and so you can see her boobs
balcony.
Too. Yeah. It's like, is he looking there too? You're making us look. They have a very weird moment for Angelica Houston. Again, talk about another swing and a miss, because in the animated movie, it's okay to have a villain that's just a villain. Mm-hmm. In the live action, it feels like, well, we need to humanize them somehow. We need to give them layers. So they give Angelica Houston one scene where they toy with the idea of making her human.
Yeah.
She's talking to Drew Barrymore. She's like, you remind me of your father because you look like a guy. It's like, what?
Yeah, it was like, we just need to take all of the most evil things about Angelica Houston and feature them for the duration of 2 hours.
For your consideration.
Angelica Houston. Yeah, just her face on the VHS cover. That was Ever After, a Cinderella story. Written and directed by Andy Tennant.
Well, and apparently 2 co-writers that had different ideas about where this movie was supposed to go.
Yes, excuse me. Suzanne Grant and Rick Parks.
Originally, it was a Leonardo da Vinci story.
And just a quick look here at Miss Grant. She wrote Aaron Brockovich.
There you go. When she freed herself from men
from the tyranny of men.
Yeah, from the patriarchy.
The Soloist. She wrote that too. So, sorry. We've had her on the podcast before. She wrote and directed Catch and Release.
That's why her name sounded familiar.
Yes, it did.
All right, so she went on to bigger and better things.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. She basically, she started off kind of rocky with Ever After, went on a decline with Aaron Brockovich, but then once Oliphant hit the scene, she was able to rebound considerably with Catch and Release.
She should use her Hollywood clout, her current Hollywood clout, to get Ever After remade with Jennifer Garner and Timothy Olyphant.
Good God. Jennifer Garner in a 19th century based piece. God bless. I think we've covered it about as well as anyone can. It's Cinderella.
It's Cinderella, live action.
That's
joyless.
The last line of the movie is Doug Gray Scott looks at the camera and goes, Cinderella!
I mean, one of the last things he says in the movie is, I guess we'll live happily ever after.
Yes.
Winks at the camera.
Worked out for one of them. All right, let's move this along.
All right, let's go to real talk.
A servant, Henry? Is this some kind of joke? Baroness, you are on dangerous ground.
Ask her yourself. She's a grasping, devious little pretender, and it is my duty, Your Highness, to expose her as the covetous hoax she is.
Tell these women who you are. Tell them.
bow before royalty, you insolent fraud.
My God, it can't be true. Nicole?
Nicole Delancre was my mother. I am what she says.
The apple. That was you?
I can explain.
Well, someone had better. First, you're engaged. And now you're a servant? I've heard enough.
Henry, please.
Do not address me so informal, madam. I am a prince of France. And you are just like them.
And we are recording for Real Talk Forever After Cullen, A Cinderella Story. Or
Thank
is
you.
it?
It's something. Definitely a very iconic poster. That poster is just imprinted into my brain from childhood. This was the first time I saw this movie, but
you knew of it.
Oh yeah, I knew the iconography of it all. Released on July 31st. I don't know why there was that weird pause there. My brain just stopped for a second. Released on July 31st of 1998. And a budget a little under 30 million. Looked like the global box office return looked around 120 million. It looks good. I was to say it looks more recent than 1998. Big part of that is it's a fucking 19th century story, so it's not like there was no Dreamcast chic in this movie. Of course, starring Drew Barrymore, directed by Andy Tennant, written by Mr. Tennant, Suzanne Grant, and Rick Parks, based on Cinderella by Charles Perrault. How old is this story? Let's see.
That's crazy because I thought that the opening was supposed to be the old lady selling the story to the Grimm brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But if Cinderella is by this Perrault guy, shouldn't she be telling the story to that guy, not to the Grimm brothers?
Okay.
Or is it Brothers Grimm? Yeah, the Grimm brothers are like outlaws. And Brothers Grimm are the spin heirs of fairy tales.
So, the earliest known variant of the Cinderella story is said to have been somewhere between 7 BC and 23 AD. So, it
predates Jesus?
It's old. I think quite literally a tale as old as time, despite what Beauty and the Beast may tell you.
Now, how many times does she get whipped in the original version?
Jesus, dude. Yeah,
she probably gets stoned.
There seems to be some discrepancies, but like I said, the earliest incarnation of the story is said to have been between 7 BC and 23 AD, about a Greek slave girl who marries the king of Egypt. So there you go. That's not necessarily what we were dealing with here, with Miss Drew Barrymore at the helm.
Same ballpark, though.
Yeah. Like I said, from what I read, she said it was one of her favorite movies that she's done, which I could see. I bet it was a fun movie to do.
She gets to make out for half the movie.
Yeah, with, what's his name, Doug Gray Scott, who I did not know. You pointed out to me that he was supposed to be Wolverine, but instead took the role of Sean Ambrose in Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, well, I think that he had taken the role, and then Mission Impossible 2 ran for too long. I think he got into an accident as well. It was just like a delayed, and then he had to be recast. Yeah.
Fortunately for him, the role of Wolverine went to Hubert Jackman, and no one ever heard of that dude again.
Some Australian guy. Some other Australian guy.
Some Aussie. All right, so 91% on the old RT. Most people were pretty high on this thing, but it does mean there's a lowly 9% of people that had to talk some smack.
Some people were turned off by all the grim and grittiness.
Well, on the poster, Drew Barrymore, of course, got top billing, but Angelica Houston was second billing on the poster. Doug Gray Scott does not get any billing. This movie's about women, damn it.
And he's an asshole in the movie anyway.
Pretty much. So who didn't like it and why?
I got 3 rotten quotes from Rotten Tomatoes. Kenneth Turan from Los Angeles Times says, though director Andy Tennant was enthusiastic about putting this kind of spin on Cinderella, his touch turns out to be counterproductive. Specifically targeting the director as the problem in this production. Susan Wlodzina from USA Today says, too much talk, not enough wooing. In the end, Ever After Spell is only half cast. Too much talk, she wanted more seduction, more...
Apparently.
And finally, Stephen Holden from the New York Times says, veering wildly between farce and suds, the movie never makes up its mind whether it's a spoof, a soap opera, or a feminist pep talk. Careful, Stephen.
Man.
You're treading dangerous ground there.
Yeah. That's the type of thing you'd be crucified for today. 22 years ago. Not so much. I mean, yeah, it's... Again, like we've talked about with... I remember it was part of like our Black Panther discussion, and it was pretty heavy in our Marvel discussion. Yes, this is a movie that is like, it's clear that they want to make women the star of it, from the good guy, the bad guy, and everything in between. That's not a reason you should get mad at a movie. That's that's fine. There's hundreds, thousands, possibly millions of films that are just male dominated. So
and just see a critic saying, but why don't we see more of the prince?
Anytime I hear something like that, that's a lot of the reviews I read about Black Panther, and they're just mad that
Martin Freeman didn't do more.
Yeah, I guess. And it's, to me, any critic that gets like any public reputation or any visible image, that's what they fall back on to critique a movie in 1998, let alone 2020. It's like you can find things to not like about the movie without having to just bitch about the fact that they're shining light on a new aspect of things. And with this, it's like, yeah, I watched it and I could tell pretty early that this was a movie that they wanted to make women the sole focus of it in every aspect, but I didn't have any issue with that.
I mean, partly because Drew Barrymore, she can carry it.
She can carry a movie. We
Yeah.
talked about this with Never Been Kissed. Drew Barrymore is probably, like, especially from the 90s, the late 90s, that era, one of the most mimicked actresses. And no, not mimics, not a good term. Parodied actresses.
Oh.
Of that time frame. They're always done from a place of love, because she seems to be like one of the nicest people, and not many people in Hollywood that I've ever heard have anything bad to say about her. But so when you go back and watch movies from the 90s, especially, I could see if like someone didn't live through that and didn't like experience it in real time with her, kind of think that she's just kind of like, how you or I would think of Charlton Heston. Like, we didn't live through that, so when we go back and watch it, he's Charlton Heston to us.
We're like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, exactly. And so my roundabout way of saying that is like, it's very easy to get lost in the character that is Drew Barrymore, and it's hard to do sometimes, but when you do, kind of splorp yourself out of that. And it helps sometimes when we watch these movies through the lenses that we do, because we kind of try to just go in like dumb. And
right.
So something like this, you see how magnetic she is, and also her ability to carry movies. A big budget movie, a summer movie like this. Angelica Houston is good, but this movie could have easily just gone off the rails if you didn't have Drew Barrymore in there holding it all together.
Well, yeah, that's it. But yes, I think we have a tendency to take it for granted because it's not acting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just her personality,
Yeah.
her screen presence. It's really what's a lot of it. And that's not to take away from her craft. It's just that she has that thing. And a lot of the projects that she works on count on that thing, on that.
She is not Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, when we talk about her, we don't say Daniel Plainview or Lincoln.
You say Drew Barrymore.
It's just Drew Barrymore every time. It's like I couldn't really. I only know Julia Gulia as a character name because of the punchline, but I don't know any of her other character names elsewhere because it's just Drew Barrymore. And that's a gift. Like there's very few actors you can refer to like that, as their ability to kind of be the same thing and everything, but be great at it and make what they make great.
Would you put Sandra Bullock in that category? Because I was thinking of Sandra Bullock in Speed and how it just blew me away how great she's
one
in
of my
Speed
favorites.
with it being effortless.
Watching that unfold with you in real time, like you just being gobsmacked by that. We know, listeners know. Blindside hurt my feelings.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, if you could forget, I'm sure there's a Drew Barrymore movie that, I'm sure she has her.
There's not a single Drew Barrymore movie that is as unjustly overrated as The Blind Side is. No, but I get your point, and that's a good one in terms of she's Sandra Bullock, but then she's got Gravity too. I'll think of it throughout, like where we're going through this, and I'm sure we'll come up with other actors or actresses to share that similar trait.
So, were you all in with Drew in this movie as you were watching it? Because to me, it took me a while, and that is, I guess, the curse of being Drew Barrymore is that anything that differs from the Drew Barrymore persona throws you off as a viewer. Mm-hmm. So the accent threw me off.
Yes,
and even the fact that she was a brunette threw me off a little bit. Yeah, and so it took me a solid maybe 20 minutes to really just accept that as part of the character and be able to just stop worrying about it and get into the rest of the story.
It's pretty fascinating too, because this was like kind of at the beginning of her big wave. I mean, obviously she's still an A-lister and all that, but there was that late 90s, beginning of the 2000s where she was just in a movie every 10 minutes, it seemed. So to do the kind of departure as that, like even before that wave broke, I think is interesting. But to your question, yeah, it took me a little bit just getting into it in general, because for all the things we've mentioned and jested about, it's still kind of going to throw you off to see Drew Barrymore in a 1500s French movie. And the accent, yeah, threw me off because I was like, what are you doing?
But then, I mean, to some people, it's again effortless. What to her is effortless in the sense of screen presence and all that stuff. Like Angelica Houston also in this movie also feels like she's in the best possible way. She's not even trying. It's just coming out so easily.
Yeah, it's so endlessly fascinating to me when certain actresses and actors are able to effortlessly be so callous and like evil. And Angelica Houston is obviously very good at that. But in this, like you said, it's just the idea of the movie that takes me a minute to adjust to. It's nothing in the movie, and once I was in, nothing like took me out of it.
Yeah,
there was like that stuff that we talked about, like Drew being whipped, being sold into slavery, and then that really awkward, forced, arranged marriage scene that was kind of played for laughs. That it's like, but it wasn't enough to like take me out of the movie, because all of the performances around them were still really good. It's just like these things that were in the movie that made me kind of, shift my eyes back and forth a few times. The weakest link in the movie to me is Doug Gray Scott.
Yeah, but is that his fault, or is that just the way that the character was written?
Yeah, I don't know if he was necessarily given too much besides be pretty. And I mean, the story of Cinderella is hardly ever about the prince.
Right. I mean, they give him, I guess, as a character, they give him more than any other incarnation of Cinderella I've seen. Mm-hmm. I know there's a very recent one from a couple of years ago that has, it's a big name actress, playing Cinderella, and one of the guys from Game of Thrones is playing the prince, and I don't think it was doing
I forgot
anything.
They did do a live action one of those.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be. I didn't watch it, but for the people that like it say that it's just. They didn't do anything. There wasn't like a major departure, but I'm assuming that there's also no fairy godmother or or talking animals. It's just I would assume there's also no whipping.
The first film adaptation of Cinderella was 1899. So there you go.
Is that? I mean, I'm guessing
Angelica Houston was also in that.
She was one of the sisters.
She's timeless. Okay. They're coming out with another Cinderella next year. I'm looking for the one you had just brought up to see. Kate Blanchett was in it. I remember that.
As the stepmother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Richard Madden is the prince.
Helena Bonham Carter was the fairy godmother.
Oh, so it does have a fairy godmother.
God, directed by Kenneth Branagh of Thor fame.
Yep.
I was gonna say why, but then it made $600 million, so
that's why.
Or 550, give or take. Disney can spare it. Like I said, there was that kind of swelled interest in period pieces like this towards the end of the 90s that I think this kind of struck while the iron was hot, and it still did. Like, the thing I love about that time frame, late 90s, early 2000s, where even if it was a period piece, you'd still have the credits kick off with some original song from like a band of some sort that is obviously not period appropriate.
Did you recognize the band in this one?
No, I read what the song was because I think it was written for the movie, if I remember correctly. Sidebar, the one that I always think about in terms of not being period appropriate but still just being perfect was Pleasantville, ending with Fiona Apple's cover of Across the Universe.
I don't remember.
Oh,
I've seen the movie,
brother. Yeah, you got to revisit it because it just lines up so perfectly.
I thought you were going to talk about A Knight's Tale because that's basically that taken to the extreme.
What does that end with?
No, it opens with We Will Rock You.
I remember that from the trailers. That's the Heath Ledger movie, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Great movie. I don't remember what it ends with. I'm sure. So the entire movie is full of those choices.
Put Your Arms Around Me by Texas is what takes us out on Ever After. This is a type of movie, too, that I remember I took an English literature class in college, and it was the semester I took it was British Lit, excuse me. It was when Beowulf came out, the CG one.
Uh-huh.
And the professor just like tore it up about, not being at all correct contextually or historically and all that. And I just remember being like,
nerd.
Hey, that was my thing. I was like, I thought it was kind of cool. Ray Winstone yelling at a dragon. I'm down for that.
Angelina Jolie.
Yes. That was one of those movies that the uncanny valley in my pants was kind of all over the place. Because she's like naked in that.
Yep.
And I'm just like, no, but that's not really her. But it was her body. And so I'm just like, this internal dialogue that's going on is crazy. I say that to say I enjoyed that, so I didn't really care. I could see this if I didn't like it and wanted to be like, yeah, what's wrong with it? I'm sure there's tons of reviews that talk about like these outfits weren't period appropriate.
Oh, fuck that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just...
That I'm sure there are people that passionately dislike this movie, but for me, again, there's a few things that took me out of the moment just due to how raw they were and kind of hard left is the phrase you used. And there's definitely a few hard lefts in here, but it's a perfectly fine movie. Like I said, I'm not sure I'll really have any interest in ever watching it again, but for my first viewing with it, I could definitely see how this could have been a big movie at the time for, middle school, high school girls. And
it does have one magical moment that I've only seen it once before, at least 10 years ago. And it was the one thing I remembered. And it's just her entrance to the ball. I think that the way that they set that
panning
up,
shot.
Yeah, the way they shoot it, the way they score it, and her performance, it's just, that's it. That's your one memorable moment. I mean, you can have more than one, but at least that one just justifies its existence as a Cinderella vehicle.
It was
Drew Barrymore.
Absolutely. That shot was absolutely in the montage that opened the 1999 MTV Movie Awards.
Of course.
Would bet money on it.
Actually, it wasn't. Or it was, half of it was, and then it cut to the actual stage, and Drew Barrymore came out dressed. and
then
she
Eminem
sang "Lose
came
Yourself."
Oh, shit.
Dun, 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 dun. Cut to Marty Scorsese.
A 20-year younger Scorsese.
Yeah.
I do love, that he was an endless, reaction machine the other night. But
Yeah.
the lose yourself thing, someone was like, they didn't see it. They asked me like, well, why did he look so dejected? And I'm like, he didn't. He's just an old man and there's like all these strobe lights going off and shit. He just didn't want to stare at it. God bless him.
Yeah. I was going to defend Doug Ray Scott's performance because I was going to say, the thing I enjoyed the most in the movie, besides her entrance to the ball, is the relationship. They really sold me on the relationship, which I didn't think I was going to at the beginning, because when you first meet him, I was like, wow, this guy, I mean, thank God he wasn't Wolverine. That was like, and then as she falls for him, I was like, oh, I'm warming up to this guy. And then by the time that they're kissing, I'm like, hell yeah. I'm fully behind this relationship. But then the moment that he acts like an asshole and the relationship goes to pieces, I completely turn on him again. So really, I don't think it's Doug Ray Scott's performance. I think it's Drew Barrymore's performance that convinces me that Doug Ray Scott is doing well. And then the moment that her character is not interested in him anymore, his character doesn't work for me again.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure he's fine. I don't know how much you remember of Mission Impossible 2. He's okay as a bad guy. Again, I don't think it's his fault. It's just the way the movie's constructed. I think he's just an okay performance so far. Maybe he has a masterpiece that is just not as popular. Ever After is not his movie. Anyone
that was 13 or 14 or however old I was when that movie came out, the number one thing they'll remember is the soundtrack. Mission Impossible 2, that is. Yes. That was eons ago on this podcast. We talked about this. But
yes.
For those of you new listeners or haven't caught completely up, my thing with Mission Impossible 2, not Tom Cruise, not Doug Ray Scott, its legacy and contribution is that it was the last movie that the soundtrack was a big deal. And I will still fuck with Take a Look Around by Limp Bizkit. It's awesome. Contextually or historically speaking, I should say, isn't that regarded as like the bastard child of the franchise?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, like all movies, it has its defenders, but
from what I remember, this like for me, the soundtrack and the thing they did with Ben Stiller are the best things that came from that movie.
Yeah.
Because isn't the like there's a lot of flying action where they try to do like Matrix style stuff and
I mean the stunts are pretty crazy.
Remember Tom Cruise's hair? That's for sure.
Yeah. It opens with the mountains, and then there's a lot of stunts and motorcycles and cars.
Right. There's a big motorcycle scene.
Yeah, the big fight, the motorcycle fight at the end is with Doug Ray Scott. And it's. But I mean, I mentioned it in that episode long ago, and I attended the Mission Impossible marathon, and it was easily the least memorable of them all. It's not just Doug Ray Scott. The entire movie is just kind of a big joke, and he's just, again, I can't see him as Wolverine, but back in the day, I wouldn't have been able to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine either. So I just don't want to judge him entirely just on one, his inability, or his bad luck at not being Wolverine, his performance in Ever After, which is a movie that's not interested in him as a character, really, or his performance in Mission Impossible 2, which is a movie that has bigger problems than his character. So, I don't know. Listeners, if you know of any awesome Doug Ray Scott movies.
It's so weird to think about anyone but Hugh Jackman being Wolverine. That's the opposite of the Drew Barrymore thing we were talking about, where she's just Drew Barrymore. Hugh Jackman, no matter what movie he's in, is just Wolverine. He's an amazing actor. He should have won an Oscar for Prisoners. He was Wolverine.
Les Mis, he was Wolverine. He was just singing.
Yeah. I would say poorly, but then Russell Crowe started singing, and I sounded like fucking Adele compared to that guy.
Every time you're watching a Hugh Jackman movie and he starts getting worked up, you looked at his hands to see if the claws are going to come out.
No, except X-Men Origins Wolverine. He was Hugh Jackman in that movie. Ever After, it's the Cinderella story, and the first half with hashtag Contrarians Corner CC, it was I felt that we had to approach it a bit differently than we do, because with most movies we just kind of basically boom the plot down, and it's Cinderella, so it's going to be easy to tell. So there's really not too much to harp on in the plot or anything like that. So I think that's where we're finding,
except for the differences, I guess. And that's I was thinking, how did they pitch this movie? What was the elevator pitch? The high concept, right? It's like it's Cinderella but without the magic, which. Now that we're not in Contrarians Corner, I mean, I don't have to pretend that I believe that the Disney animated version was the first Cinderella of them all. So obviously, there was a Cinderella there were versions of Cinderella before they brought in the songs and the and the cute animals and all that stuff. But still, I think that at the time that this movie gets made, whenever you thought of Cinderella, you thought of just what's the most popular version of it, and that's the Disney version, the animated version. And they're like, okay, forget about that, and instead we're gonna be a little more realistic about it. And
Well, which was that was like 1998. That was the late 90s. Like, we want more edgy, realistic type shit, and so that makes perfect sense. And that's why I think this movie could have been heavily relatable. And the whole reason this came up was because a girl who's about the same age as us asked if we had ever done it for the podcast, because she said it was a favorite movie of hers when she was younger, something along those lines. And I could definitely see how this movie could resonate with people at that point in time. I don't like it at all, but some people feel that way about Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, because it stripped away a lot of the fantastical aspects of it. And
no fairy godmother for Romeo anymore.
No. But that was of that time period. And I think we talked off air about other shit, saying it's cyclical. I'll be interested to see if that comes back around, because there's definitely, you want to talk about swelled interest. There's like an unstoppable hemorrhage of interest in fantastical things right now. Primarily because the real world's about as scary as it's been in a while.
Yeah.
And, but I'll be interested to see if it comes back around to where,
Now you want to bring back the fantastical elements into mundane stories, or do you want to strip the fantastical elements from the
latter.
Okay.
So basically how we got Batman Begins, and like movies like this, like a retelling of Cinderella or Romeo and Juliet, where it's stripped down to be more realistic.
Well, you saw like the trailer for the new Mulan, right? Where it's
I'm not dignifying this fucking Disney thing they're doing, where they're just fucking remaking everything live action.
Well, Mulan.
But I have seen the trailer for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if anything else, Mulan seems like the one that would benefit from this, because they are really getting rid of everything, even the songs, and the dragon. No Eddie Murphy.
I was about to say, it's just Eddie Murphy. It's not
Eddie
a
Murphy
dragon.
It's Eddie Murphy doing stand up.
You know, man.
The trailer looks like a completely different movie. It's not like when you see the trailers of all the other live action remakes they're doing, where you're like, oh, that's just like the animated movie
Lilo
but
and
in live
Stitch.
action. God. Where Stitch is just a dog now.
That ties the 2 points together. So it'll be interesting to see if that movie does anything.
Yeah. It looks positioned like everybody, even people that are pretty burned out on the Disney remake machine right now, they're excited because the way they're promoting it is the completely opposite of what they've been using to promote the other ones. It's not, hey, look how it is just like what you remember. It's like, this is nothing like what you remember.
Which that shit always has its place too.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder what the take's going to be on this new Cinderella that they're making. Are they going to go realistic, or are they going to go fairy godmother?
No telling, man. It's
more importantly, who's Josh Gad going to voice?
he had a shining moment in the Oscars. Like I said, he looked hungover as fuck. That was one of the coolest things, him talking about there's 49 other Olafs in the world. Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say about Ever After. It's a fine movie. Drew Barrymore is great. She's a generational talent. For the things we mentioned about her ability to be her in everything she does, but that still be great. There's probably something that I'm blanking on. I don't want to watch any of the Sandler movies she did except Wedding Singer, but for the most part, you're usually in safe hands with a Drew Barrymore movie, and I feel that way about this one. It was, like I said, I'm not going to go out and buy it. I will compliment, I assume this is your wife's copy that we watched on DVD?
Yes.
Okay. So, 20th Century Fox, it's like an original DVD, and the transfer on it is so good.
It looked great.
It makes me so upset. And, I've got about another 18 months of this conversation before physical media is completely dead. But, man, when we got that first few waves of DVDs up until about 2007 or 8, the transfers were just so high quality. And this is no exception. So, compliment that. And then, outside of the transfer looking good, the movie itself looks great. it can be easy for period piece movies to kind of look disjointed and wonky. I thought this looked really good. So yeah, for what it is, I'd probably a B plus, just because like the Prince Henry character, like you mentioned, there's some parts of and then just some of the hard lefts it takes. I think for the tone they were going for could have been a little lighter.
Really, the one big whiff for me and for you, because we both reacted the same way as we were watching the movie, was the wedding. The wedding that doesn't happen, where just the Spanish princess is just crying and it's not funny. It's just really uncomfortable. And then the problem is that they play it off as a joke, because you asked me, is this supposed to be funny? And just as I was about to answer, the prince laughs. And I'm like, well, there's the answer. Because he could have had a reaction that was not laughter. He could have just looked concerned and they could have played it straight. And then you'd be like, all right, it makes more sense. But
yeah. It goes on for like a few minutes, and the main thing that makes it stick out so much is it's dead silent except for her wailing. Yeah. And it's like, this seems off kilter.
And like I said in Contrarians Corner, it's underlined by the fact that you just watch Drew Barrymore get dragged away by these guys, this guy that's obsessed with her.
That like is sexually pined for her.
Yeah, so it's just gross and disturbing, and it's a good point to make, but it feels like the way they went about it doesn't jibe with the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I would say 3.5 for me. I know I want to give it 4 just because I like Drew Barrymore so much. And it's
for a
just
2-hour runtime also, it didn't
just flew by.
Yeah, it flew by.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with 3.5 because what the fuck was Leonardo da Vinci doing in this movie? Just seems like such a out of nowhere.
The trivia, the study I usually do for these things. Like I said, they didn't yield too much gold, except now I know that the original Mona Lisa was on a piece of wood and not a piece of canvas, because someone pointed that out.
It was like, actually, the Mona Lisa wouldn't have been rolled up in a tube.
Yeah, which is exactly how it read. But at the same time, I was like, I didn't know that. So now
thank you for your pedantic commentary.
Hey, now there's a possibility that I can impress a girl with that knowledge. So, and then she'll be like, how do you know that? I'll be like, well, I have a podcast.
Have you ever watched Ever After?
Do you know what Rotten Tomatoes is? So that concludes Ever After. That would is that episode
102.
102. So do we have 103 lined up yet?
To be discussed. I think we have options.
Okay. So stay tuned. Stay tuned to the Instagram and Twitter account for up to the minute breaking news. Winding things down here, moving into plugs as we usually do. First and foremost, the Festive Years, who provide our opening and closing tracks. They provide Last Stand, which kicks us off, and Summer of '99, which takes us home on our numeric episodes. Thefestiveyears.com is where you can go for music, pictures, info, everything.
All your Festive Years needs.
All your Festive Years needs.
Our logo was designed, executed by Hansworth Gieser, he of the Mil Demonios Twitter account. MILDEMONIOS. Also has an email address, mildemonios@hotmail.com. He has 2 podcasts. He has a zombie novel. He has everything. The man is on top of the world. But you can still contact him if you want to buy his book, Requiem por Lurin.
He hosts the Peruvian version of the Today Show.
Yes, Nacion Combi, available on all podcatchers. That's in Spanish. If you want to listen to him in English, Living in Peru. It's a podcast about immigrants to Peru in English. That's available on iVox. And he has designed, I haven't shown them to you yet, but he did 3 alternate logos for whenever we get around to our horror movie mini arc that he wants us to do.
Awesome.
Like classic horror. So he did a tomato that looks like Frankenstein, a tomato that looks like Dracula, and a tomato that looks like, I guess, the Mummy. It was like
awesome.
3 classic monsters. And I was like, all right, come Halloween time, we'll do this thing, and then we'll replace the logo on Twitter.
That's great.
But yeah, check out his stuff. He's great.
Man, between all the Terminator movies we've watched and just general life busyness, the only thing is King of the Hills on Hulu. I mean, I know seasons 2 through 5 of King of the Hill, page and verse.
Why not the first one? Not that
I
great?
just haven't seen it as much.
Oh.
It's like The Simpsons, the first season of The Simpsons. I've seen it probably once or twice all the way through, but I couldn't quote it as much just because they hadn't found their stride yet. So it's not one that I actively revisit.
Is that the one where they still look kind of weird?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, it's on Hulu, and I've used that. I've supplemented that as my nightly what I fall asleep to. And then I realized going through it that I never actually watched the last season. I've seen the finale, but I never watched the whole last season. I watched the finale like as it aired, and it ends perfectly. Anyway.
Is it Hank walking out to the airport and then...
No.
I don't know the other names. I don't know which female character would have run after him.
Peggy.
Peggy.
Yeah. Anyway, the one thing I didn't know going into it is that this is like 10 years old, so I'm not worried about spoiling it. I didn't have it spoiled for me, though, which was pretty impressive. Hank's dad dies. Like, actually dies. Like, they tease it kind of throughout the show, but...
Was that episode written by Susanna Grant? She's like, this show is not real enough.
And so that's like in the second to last season, and then the last season, he finally gets his dad's like will and testament and what he wants done with his ashes and stuff. And the episode is him and his friends seeing his dad's final wishes through to fruition. And the way the episode ends is so silly and goofy, but it like got me so hard emotionally watching it that it was so weird. Like I started just laughing to myself at something not overly funny just because of how well it was executed. Like not uncomfortable laughter, but just kind of like, you know, when you're incredulous and you can't believe like a writer was able to pull something like that off.
Right.
Yeah. So it's so hard for shows like that are so good and you watch episodes during their heyday. I've said this about 30 Rock, and it's like obviously the biggest thing people harp on The Simpsons about is like it's not as good as it used to be. Yeah, it's been around for 30 years. It's going to happen. So for King of the Hill to have the run that it did, it went 13 seasons.
Jesus.
And still up until the end been able to resonate as powerfully as it did. I think that's really admirable. So I don't know if it's just a general plug for King of the Hill, but I was just very, very impressed going through the final season for the first time that they were able to hold the bar so high. It didn't really waver. Once they found their stride, they kept it, and it didn't really go anywhere.
It has a proper ending.
Yes.
That's cool.
Fully conceding that our international listeners may not really understand that show that well. And by international, I mean anyone that doesn't live in Texas. That it seems like a crutch. Sometimes people say it's a crutch to fall on, and I will lean on that somewhat. It helps a lot if you are familiar with Texas culture, that show. So there's that. Because they talk about a place called Whataburger that's basically heaven on earth.
I would imagine if you somehow stick with it for a few seasons, at one point it just stops mattering. Because even if you are not a Texan or you've never been to Texas,
you understand
that Texas is this mythical place where King of the Hill happens.
I feel like I remember some guy, a wrestling fan that lives in the UK. I feel like I remember reading an interview with him. He's like someone of prominence in the internet community, and I think he said he thought some of the shit on there was just made up to be funny, and then he came to Texas for like a WrestleMania one year and was like, oh, this is like how these people live here.
There really is a 12-egg omelet.
Thumbs up on that. Julio, I know we're coming off the Oscars. You have anything you want to recommend to the listening audience?
Well, I mean, funny you should mention it, Alex, because this is Oscar related. Tangentially, our friends from Word Salad, Joe Ketchum, I've been on his podcast a couple of times, and last week he sent me a message and he's like, hey, do you want to do a special podcast episode of whatever documentary wins? And I said, sure. So Sunday, we're crossing our fingers, hoping that the one that, because we've both seen all five, and we both agreed on which one was the one that we didn't want to do. And luckily that one didn't win. American Factory took the Oscar, which was not the one I was rooting for, but it's it's a good documentary, and there was a conversation we had about it. So I literally recorded that with him this morning. It's Word Salad. I brought it up before. It's just sort of a, it's Word Salad is the name of the podcast, but within it, like the Word Salad umbrella covers different like little shows where he gets to do whatever he wants. So if he feels like talking about time travel in movies, he has a show that's about time travel. If he feels like talking about just doing top 5 lists. He has a show that's about top 5 lists, and then his show about documentaries is called Doc and Roll.
Nice.
And they've covered several documentaries. I've listened to the episodes of docs that I know, like American Movie and Grizzly Man, and now American Factory, which he said should be out on February 16th. So by the time that this episode comes out, it should be out already.
Excellent.
So look up Word Salad, the American Factory episode. You'll hear my voice. You'll hear Joe's voice. We talk about China. We talk about capitalism. It's a lot of fun.
Excellent. All right. Well, that is going to do it for Ever After. Goodbye. So that's going to do it for Ever After. As always, we do appreciate y'all listening to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
That summer of 1999, back when you blew my